Have you ever felt like God works in mysterious ways, sending blessings when you least expect them? What happens when a lonely man opens his heart to a stray pregnant golden retriever on a stormy winter night? This is a story of faith, the healing power of love, and how God's grace can restore our trust in the goodness of life and humanity. Stay with us to witness this heartwarming journey of hope and redemption. The winter storm outside David Walker's small home was relentless, shaking the windows with icy gusts and covering the countryside in a thick blanket of snow. At 65, David had grown accustomed to these quiet, isolated evenings. The only sounds in his home were the ticking of the grandfather clock and the occasional crackle from the fireplace. His wife, Emily, had passed away 5 years ago, leaving the house devoid of the laughter and warmth it once knew. Tonight, however, a faint noise outside shattered the stillness. David paused, straining to listen. It was barely audible over the roar of the wind, a soft, plaintive whimper. He frowned, setting his book aside, and rose from his armchair, his joints protesting the movement. Grabbing his thick coat, he made his way to the front door. When he opened it, a blast of icy wind greeted him, cutting through the warmth of the house. The sound came again, more distinct this time, drawing his eyes to a huddled form on the porch. There, barely visible against the snow, was a golden retriever. Her golden coat was dusted with white, and her body trembled as she lifted her head to meet David's gaze. Her eyes, dark and filled with a mix of hope and exhaustion, seemed to plead for help. "Oh, you poor thing," David muttered, crouching down. As he reached out, she didn't move, allowing him to gently stroke her snow-covered fur. Her belly was swollen. She was heavily pregnant. "Out here in this storm," he said, his voice soft with concern. Without hesitation, he carefully scooped her into his arms. She was light, her frailty clear as her head rested against his chest. "Let's get you warm," he murmured, closing the door behind him. Inside, David set her down on an old quilt he'd laid near the fireplace. The heat from the flames quickly enveloped her, and she curled up, still trembling but beginning to relax. David knelt beside her, brushing the melting snow from her fur, revealing the soft golden tones underneath. "You're safe now," he said gently, his voice soothing. Her eyes met his again, and for a moment, he felt a connection, a silent understanding that she trusted him. Rising to his feet, he went to the kitchen to find something she could eat. His pantry was modest, stocked only with the basics, but he found a can of tuna. As he opened it, the sound seemed to rouse her. She lifted her head, her nose twitching. "It's not much, but it'll have to do," David said as he placed the bowl in front of her. She sniffed it cautiously before eating, her movements slow and deliberate. Watching her, David felt a small, unfamiliar warmth bloom in his chest. "You're a proper lady, aren't you?" he mused aloud, noticing her graceful manner. "Maybe that's what I'll call you, lady." He paused, shaking his head. "No, that doesn't quite fit." He studied her closely, the firelight reflecting in her expressive eyes. "Molly. You look like a Molly." At the sound of her new name, the dog's tail gave a small wag. David chuckled. "Molly it is." As the storm continued to rage outside, David sat in his armchair, his book forgotten. His gaze kept returning to Molly, who had fallen into a deep, peaceful sleep by the fire. Her breathing was steady now, her body relaxed, but the sight of her swollen belly brought a flicker of concern. "How did you end up here, girl?" he murmured, as though she might answer. "You shouldn't have been out there alone." The room felt different with her in it, less empty. It wasn't just the sound of her soft breathing or the occasional twitch of her paws. It was her presence, the way she filled the space with a quiet warmth. For the first time in years, David didn't feel entirely alone. When David awoke the next morning, he found Molly sitting near the window, her nose pressed against the glass. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving a serene blanket of snow that glistened in the morning sun. Molly turned to look at him, her tail wagging softly as if to greet him. "Well, good morning," David said, his voice lighter than it had been in a long time. He poured himself a cup of coffee and prepared a small bowl of water for Molly. She drank eagerly, then followed him around the kitchen as he fixed breakfast. As he watched her move, David couldn't help but notice how thin she was despite her pregnancy. The thought brought a pang of worry. He had no experience caring for a pregnant dog, and her condition made him uneasy. Picking up the phone, he called the local veterinary clinic. Later that afternoon, Dr. Sophia Mitchell arrived at David's home. A young veterinarian with a warm demeanor, Sophia immediately set to work examining Molly. The dog was initially hesitant, but soon relaxed under Sophia's gentle touch. "She's healthy," Sophia assured David after the examination, "but she'll need a quiet, warm place to deliver her puppies. I'd guess she's about 2 weeks away." David nodded, feeling a mix of relief and responsibility. "I'll make sure she has everything she needs." Sophia left him with supplies and instructions, her parting words ringing in his ears. "She's lucky to have found you, Mr. Walker." Over the following days, David worked diligently to prepare a safe space for Molly. He cleared a corner of the living room, layering old blankets to create a soft nest. During his rare trips to town, he picked up dog food and supplies, surprising himself with how much he enjoyed the task. Molly, for her part, seemed to sense the change. She followed David everywhere, her tail wagging whenever he spoke to her. When he sat in his armchair, she would rest her head on his knee, her eyes filled with quiet gratitude. "You've brought something back to this house, Molly," David said one evening as they sat by the fire. "It's been too quiet for too long." Her response was a soft thump of her tail against the floor. Molly's arrival marked the beginning of something new for David. The once empty house now felt alive, filled with the sounds of her gentle movements and the warmth of her companionship. For the first time in years, he found himself looking forward to the days ahead, the arrival of her puppies and the changes they would bring. As he looked at Molly curled up by the fire that evening, David felt a spark of hope flicker within him. She had brought light to his life, and he was ready to embrace it. The days following Molly's arrival brought a subtle but profound change to David Walker's life. The once empty house, with its silent halls and forgotten corners, now felt alive. Molly had become more than just a guest. She was a companion, a steady presence that filled the quiet with purpose. But with her presence came new responsibilities, ones that David embraced with a sense of determination he hadn't felt in years. The care instructions from Dr. Sophia Mitchell became David's new guide to life. Each day started with a routine he quickly adapted to, preparing Molly's meals, ensuring her water bowl was clean and full, and making her as comfortable as possible. She was a patient housemate, following him with quiet steps, her gaze filled with trust and curiosity. David quickly learned the nuances of Molly's needs. She had specific preferences, like curling up near the fireplace in the evenings or lying in the patch of sunlight that spilled through the kitchen window during the morning. Her calm demeanor made her an easy companion, but David couldn't ignore the responsibility of her impending labor. Sophia checked in regularly, her visits bringing reassurance and guidance. She examined Molly's progress and praised David's efforts. "You're doing great, Mr. Walker," she said during one visit, smiling as Molly wagged her tail. "She's lucky to have you." David chuckled, feeling a mix of pride and humility. "I think it's the other way around," he replied, scratching Molly behind the ears. As the days turned into weeks, David found himself talking to Molly more than he'd expected. It started with small observations, comments about the weather or casual remarks about what he was cooking. But soon the conversations grew deeper, weaving in memories of his late wife, Emily. "Emily would have loved you," he said one evening as they sat by the fire. Molly rested her head on his knee, her eyes fixed on him, as though she understood every word. She always had a soft spot for animals, strays especially. She used to say they had the purest souls. He paused, his fingers gently stroking Molly's fur. "She wanted a dog, you know, but we kept putting it off. Work, family, life, it always felt like there wasn't enough time." Molly blinked slowly, a gesture David had come to interpret as understanding. He smiled faintly. "You remind me of her in a way, quiet, gentle, but full of life." Molly's presence brought David a sense of comfort he hadn't realized he needed. Each time he sat in his armchair, she would settle at his feet or place her head in his lap. Her steady companionship became a balm for the grief he had carried for so long. The weight of Emily's absence still lingered, but Molly made it easier to bear. There were moments when the house felt less like a repository of memories and more like a home again. Molly's quiet energy seemed to bring life to the space. Her soft footsteps on the hardwood floor, the gentle thump of her tail against the furniture, and even the sound of her contented sighs created a rhythm that David hadn't known he missed. One morning, as David watched Molly bask in the sunlight by the kitchen window, he realized how much she had changed his routine. He no longer lingered in bed, dreading the start of another lonely day. Instead, he woke up with a sense of purpose, eager to care for her and prepare for the arrival of her puppies. One evening, as the snow fell softly outside, David found himself sitting with Molly by the fireplace, a cup of tea in hand. The room was quiet except for the occasional crackle of the fire and the steady sound of Molly's breathing. He stared into the flames, his mind drifting to the past. "I used to think this house was too big," he said, his voice low. "After Emily passed, it felt empty. Every room was a reminder of what I'd lost." Molly lifted her head, her dark eyes meeting his. Encouraged by her silent presence, David continued, "But now it feels different. You've brought something back, Molly. I don't know what it is, but it's like I can breathe again." He reached down, scratching behind her ears. "Maybe Emily had a hand in this," he said with a soft chuckle. "She always believed in little miracles." The closer Molly's due date approached, the more David found himself preparing for the puppies. He rearranged the spare bedroom, layering old quilts and blankets to create a cozy nest. He even purchased a few toys from the local pet store, a decision that made the clerk raise an amused eyebrow. "They'll need something to chew on," David had explained, his tone defensive but his cheeks tinged with color. Back home, Molly seemed to approve of his efforts. She explored the newly arranged room with interest, her nose sniffing every corner. When she finally settled into the nest, David felt a sense of accomplishment he hadn't experienced in years. "You've got a good place here," he told her, watching as she curled up on the blankets. "I think you're going to be a wonderful mom." Molly's presence gave David more than just company. It gave him a reason to reconnect with the world. He began venturing into town more often, picking up supplies and occasionally chatting with neighbors he hadn't spoken to in years. Conversations were brief but meaningful, often centered around Molly and her impending puppies. "She's a beauty," one neighbor remarked after spotting Molly through the front window. "Looks like she's got quite the story." David smiled, nodding. "She's brought a lot to this old house." At night, as David sat by the fire with Molly by his side, he felt a growing sense of gratitude. She had arrived unexpectedly, but her presence had filled a void he thought would never be filled. For the first time in years, David felt like his life had meaning again. 3 weeks after Molly had entered David Walker's life, the house was filled with an air of quiet anticipation. The old man, now deeply attached to the golden retriever who had brought warmth and companionship to his once empty home, had prepared meticulously for the impending arrival of her puppies. Every corner of the spare bedroom had been arranged with care, lined with soft blankets and toys. But no amount of preparation could truly ready him for the miracle he was about to witness. It was a chilly Wednesday afternoon when David noticed Molly behaving differently. She paced the living room, her usual calm replaced by restlessness. Her tail swished nervously and she paused frequently to glance at David, as if seeking reassurance. David set his mug of tea down, his heart quickening. "Is it time, girl?" he asked softly, rising from his chair. Molly let out a soft whimper and began walking toward the spare bedroom, pausing at the doorway to look back at him. "All right, I'm coming," David said, following her into the room. He knelt beside her as she settled into the nest he had carefully arranged, her breathing shallow and quick. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for the phone to call Dr. Sophia Mitchell. Sophia answered on the first ring. "Mr. Walker, how's Molly?" I think it's happening," David stammered, glancing at the golden retriever as she let out a low, steady whine. "She's restless, and her breathing's changed." "I'll be there as soon as I can," Sophia reassured him. In the meantime, just stay with her. She knows what to do, but she'll need your calm presence." David hung up the phone and sat on the floor beside Molly, stroking her head gently. "You've got this, Molly," he murmured. "We're in this together." The first puppy arrived just as Sophia walked through the front door. She moved quickly but calmly, carrying her bag of supplies into the spare bedroom. Molly was fully focused, her body instinctively guiding her through the process. David watched in awe as Sophia offered quiet encouragement. "You're doing beautifully, Molly," Sophia said, her voice steady and reassuring. She glanced at David and smiled. "And so are you, Mr. Walker." David couldn't tear his eyes away as the tiny, squirming puppy emerged, a soft bundle of golden fur, glistening and fragile. Molly immediately began cleaning the newborn with gentle licks, her maternal instincts kicking in. "It's a boy," Sophia announced, handing David a clean towel to dry the pup. "Your first little one." David's hands shook as he held the tiny creature, his heart swelling with a mix of awe and responsibility. "Hello, little guy," he whispered. "Welcome to the world." Over the next 2 hours, Molly delivered 4 more puppies, each one unique and perfect. Sophia worked diligently, but David was captivated by the process, his emotions oscillating between nervousness and joy. When it was all over, Molly lay in her nest, exhausted but content, with 5 tiny puppies nursing at her side. Sophia carefully examined each one, her professional demeanor softening as she spoke. 2 boys and 3 girls, all healthy and strong. David looked down at the little family, his eyes misting. "They're beautiful," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Sophia smiled. "You've got quite the family now, Mr. Walker. Molly's done an amazing job, and so have you." As Sophia packed up her supplies, she gave David a list of care instructions. "I'll check back in a few days, but in the meantime, keep an eye on Molly and the pups. Make sure everyone is eating well and staying warm." David nodded, his attention never leaving Molly and her puppies. "Thank you, Dr. Mitchell. I couldn't have done this without you." Sophia's expression softened. "You've done more than you realize, Mr. Walker. Molly and her pups are lucky to have you." That evening, David sat beside Molly, marveling at the tiny, wriggling forms nestled against her. Each one seemed to have its own personality, even at this young age. He decided it was time to name them. The firstborn, a sturdy little boy with a light golden coat, was named Finn, for his strong and adventurous spirit. The second, a delicate girl with soft fur, became Ruby, her name reflecting her gentle demeanor. The third, a darker-coated boy with an energetic air, was christened Max. The fourth, a curious and observant girl, was named Lila, and the last, a chubby little boy with a sunny disposition, became Theo. "Molly," David said, leaning closer to her, "you've done something incredible here. Look at them, our little miracles." Molly gave a soft wag of her tail, her eyes closing as she rested her head on her paws. David sat back, a sense of contentment washing over him. The house, once so silent and still, now felt alive in a way he hadn't experienced in years. Over the next few days, the puppies brought a whirlwind of activity and joy to David's life. Their tiny squeaks and movements filled the house with a new rhythm, and David found himself captivated by their every action. He spent hours watching them, marveling at how quickly they grew and changed. Molly proved to be an attentive mother, rarely leaving her pup's side. David supported her as best he could, ensuring she had plenty of food and water, and keeping the room warm and quiet. In return, Molly seemed to trust him completely, often looking to him for reassurance. For David, the arrival of the puppies marked more than just a change in routine. It was a transformation of his home and his heart. Each tiny life represented a new beginning, a reminder that even in the depths of winter, life could flourish. One evening, as the puppies dozed beside Molly, David sat in his armchair, a cup of cocoa in hand. The soft sounds of their breathing mingled with the crackle of the fire, creating a symphony of life that filled the room. David smiled, his heart full. "You've turned this house into a home again, Molly," he said softly. "I didn't know I needed this, but now I can't imagine it any other way." Molly blinked at him, her tail thumping gently against the floor. It was as if she understood exactly what he meant. As David settled in for the night, he reflected on how much had changed in just a few short weeks. Molly's arrival had been unexpected, but it had brought him everything he hadn't realized he was missing: love, purpose, and the promise of brighter days ahead. The snow had begun to melt, revealing patches of earth beneath as winter grudgingly gave way to early spring. Inside David Walker's home, however, the warmth had little to do with the changing season. The arrival of Molly and her puppies had turned the quiet house into a lively sanctuary filled with the sounds of tiny paws, playful squeaks, and soft barks. It wasn't just the puppies that had transformed David's world. It was the sense of purpose they brought. David hadn't expected visitors, but when his daughter Emma called to say she and her son Noah wanted to stop by, he found himself strangely excited. It had been months since their last visit, and the thought of sharing his newfound joy with them filled him with anticipation. When Emma and Noah arrived, the first thing they noticed was the change in David. Emma stood in the doorway for a moment, taking in her father's relaxed posture and the spark of energy in his voice as he greeted them. "Dad, you look different," she said, smiling as she hugged him. "What's your secret?" David chuckled. "Come inside and I'll show you." As they stepped into the living room, Noah's eyes widened at the sight before him. Molly lay comfortably in her nest by the fireplace, surrounded by 5 tiny puppies tumbling over each other. The room, once so austere, now felt vibrant and full of life. "Puppies," Noah exclaimed, dropping to his knees beside Molly. "Grandpa, when did you get these?" David smiled, his heart warming at his grandson's excitement. "It's a long story. Molly showed up during a storm and, well, the rest is history." Noah reached out cautiously, his small hands gentle as he stroked one of the puppies. Molly watched him for a moment, then rested her head back on her paws, her trust evident. "They're so cute," Noah said, his eyes bright with wonder. "Can I name one?" David laughed. "They already have names, but I'll let you help me decide which one is your favorite." While Noah played with the puppies, Emma watched her father carefully. There was a lightness in him that she hadn't seen in years. The grief that had weighed him down since her mother's passing seemed to have lifted, replaced by something quieter but no less profound: contentment. "Dad," she said softly, "this is amazing. You've changed." David glanced at her, his eyes twinkling. "I didn't plan for any of this, Emma. Molly just showed up one night, and somehow she brought this house back to life." Emma smiled, her voice filled with emotion. "I can see that. It's like you found a piece of yourself again." David nodded, his gaze shifting to Molly and the puppies. "She gave me a reason to wake up in the morning. A reason to care again." As the afternoon passed, Noah bonded quickly with the puppies, his laughter echoing through the house as they clambered over him. One of them, a lively little boy named Max, seemed particularly drawn to the boy, following him around with an energetic wag of his tail. "Grandpa, I think Max likes me best," Noah declared, grinning as the puppy nipped playfully at his shoelaces. David chuckled, watching the scene unfold. "He does seem to have taken a shine to you." Emma joined her father on the couch, her eyes on Noah. "He's been so happy today. It's been a tough few months for him. School's been rough, and he's missed having more family around." David nodded, his expression softening. "Maybe we all needed this. Something to remind us what it feels like to be connected." Later, as the sun began to dip behind the trees, David prepared a simple dinner, while Emma and Noah stayed with Molly and the puppies. The house was filled with the sounds of conversation, laughter, and the occasional playful bark. At the dining table, Emma couldn't help but comment on how different the house felt. "It's not just the puppies, Dad. It's you. You seem happier." David looked down at his plate, his voice quiet but steady. "I didn't realize how lonely I'd been until Molly showed up. She didn't just bring herself. She brought life back to this house. And now I have all of you here too." Emma reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "Mom would be so proud of you." David's smile was tinged with sadness but also gratitude. "I think she sent Molly to me. It feels like something she would have done." After dinner, Noah insisted on helping feed Molly and the puppies, carefully measuring out their portions under David's guidance. The boy's enthusiasm was contagious, and even Emma found herself laughing as she watched her son navigate the chaos of 5 hungry puppies. Before they left, Emma took a moment to stand with her father in the quiet of the living room. "You've built something beautiful here, Dad," she said. "Thank you for sharing it with us." David nodded, his heart full. "Thank you for coming. I didn't realize how much I needed to see you both." As they hugged, Noah ran back into the room, cradling Max in his arms. "Grandpa, can I visit again soon? I want to see how Max grows up." David chuckled, ruffling his grandson's hair. "You're welcome any time, Noah." As Emma and Noah drove away, David stood at the window, watching their car disappear down the snowy road. The house was quiet again, but it no longer felt empty. Turning back to the living room, he saw Molly watching him, her tail wagging gently. The puppies were asleep in a pile beside her, their tiny bodies rising and falling with each breath. David sank into his armchair, the warmth of the day still lingering in his chest. For the first time in years, he felt truly connected, not just to Molly and the puppies, but to his family and to life itself. "Molly," he said softly, leaning down to scratch behind her ears, "you've done more than I could have ever imagined." Her response was a soft thump of her tail, her gaze steady and reassuring. David smiled, feeling the weight of years of loneliness finally lifting. The house, once a symbol of solitude, had become a home again, a place where love and connection thrived. David Walker's home had always been quiet, its walls steeped in memories of a life that once was. But since the arrival of Molly and her 5 puppies, that quiet had transformed into a warm symphony of life. The once solemn house now brimmed with the sound of tiny paws scampering across the floor, playful barks echoing through the halls, and Molly's patient but firm nudges as she wrangled her energetic brood. For David, these sounds weren't just noise, they were music, a daily reminder that his life had taken a turn towards something extraordinary. Determined to give Molly and the puppies the best possible environment, David poured his energy into transforming his home into what he affectionately called the Puppy Palace. He cleared space in the living room, adding soft rugs and baby gates to create a safe play area. A corner was dedicated to their toys, rubber balls, chewable ropes, and squeaky animals, all of which the puppies tackled with unbridled enthusiasm. In the backyard, David installed a small agility course, complete with tiny tunnels and ramps. Though the puppies were too young to fully explore it, he imagined the joy they would have once they were old enough to run and play outside. The sight of their eager faces peering out from the kitchen door, tails wagging in unison, filled him with a sense of accomplishment. Each change he made to the house was another layer of warmth added to his life. The once empty spare room now served as a nursery for the puppies, while the kitchen became their central hub, filled with bowls of food, water, and treats. Everywhere David turned, there was life. It was during one quiet afternoon, as David sat watching the puppies tumble over each other in the play area, that inspiration struck. With his old laptop perched on the coffee table, he began to type out the story of Molly's arrival. The words flowed easily, each one a testament to the joy she had brought into his life. He titled the post, "From the Storm to a Home, Molly's Journey." David hesitated before hitting publish, unsure if anyone would care about the story of a retired accountant and his dog, but something inside him urged him forward. Within hours, the post began to gain attention. Comments from strangers poured in, some sharing their own stories of rescue pets, others simply expressing their delight at the tale. Encouraged by the response, David decided to start a blog. He called it Molly's World, Life with Pause and Purpose. Each week, he documented the adventures of Molly and her puppies, filling the posts with anecdotes, reflections, and photos. The stories ranged from Max's mischievous attempts to chew on David's slippers to Ruby's quiet moments of affection, curling up beside him as he read. To his surprise, the blog quickly gained a following. Readers from all over the world commented on his posts, sharing their own love for animals and how his stories brightened their days. The once private man found himself engaging with a community of pet lovers, each interaction bringing a sense of connection he hadn't experienced in years. With the blog thriving, David's days took on a new rhythm. Mornings began with coffee and the puppy's breakfast, a lively affair filled with wagging tails and eager yips. Afterward, he would sit down at his laptop, capturing the day's moments while Molly watched over the chaos with maternal patience. The afternoons were reserved for playtime. David often found himself on the floor, laughing as the puppies clambered over him, their boundless energy infectious. Molly would join in occasionally, her tail wagging as she gently herded the more adventurous pups back toward safety. Evenings were quieter, a time for reflection. David would sit by the fire, Molly at his feet, and the puppies nestled together in their bed. He often read aloud, his voice filling the room as the flames cast a warm glow. It was during these moments that he felt the most at peace, his heart full in a way he hadn't thought possible. The blog wasn't just a creative outlet for David. It became a bridge to the outside world. Neighbors who had once been strangers began stopping by, curious about the puppies they had seen in his posts. David welcomed them warmly, introducing them to Molly and her growing family. He also received invitations to local events such as pet adoption fairs and community gatherings. Though hesitant at first, David accepted, bringing Molly and the puppies along. The events were filled with laughter and conversation, and David found himself connecting with people who shared his newfound passion for animals. One day, a woman approached him at an event holding a copy of one of his blog posts. "Your story inspired me to adopt a dog," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "Thank you for sharing it." David smiled, his eyes misting. "It's Molly who deserves the thanks. She's the one who changed my life." As the weeks passed, David realized how much his life had shifted. The house, once a silent monument to his grief, had become a vibrant, bustling home filled with love and laughter. Photos of Molly and the puppies adorned the walls, joining the memories of Emily and their family. Toys and bedding were scattered in every room, creating a cozy chaos that David wouldn't trade for anything. The blog continued to flourish, with readers eagerly awaiting updates on the puppies' antics. David's storytelling resonated deeply, reminding people of the beauty in simple, everyday moments. He often ended his posts with a reflection on the love and joy that animals brought into our lives, a sentiment that seemed to strike a chord with everyone who read it. One evening, as David sat with Molly and the puppies by the fire, he thought about how far they had come. "You've turned this house into something incredible," he said, his voice soft. "It's not just a house anymore. It's a home." Molly looked up at him, her brown eyes warm and understanding. She wagged her tail, as if to say she agreed. David's transformation didn't go unnoticed. His daughter Emma often remarked on how happy he seemed, and Noah insisted on visiting as often as possible to play with the puppies. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers became a part of his expanding world, each interaction a reminder that life was richer when shared. The house that had once been a refuge of solitude was now a hub of connection and joy. David knew that none of this would have been possible without Molly's arrival that fateful night. She had brought more than companionship, she had brought life, love, and purpose. As David watched the puppies play under Molly's watchful eye, he smiled. For the first time in years, he felt like his life was exactly where it was meant to be. David Walker had always thought healing was a quiet process, one that involved time and solitude. But in the weeks and months since Molly's arrival, he had come to understand that healing often came in unexpected ways, through a wagging tail, a warm nuzzle, or the playful antics of 5 mischievous puppies. Molly wasn't just a companion, she was a lifeline, guiding David out of the depths of his grief and back into the light. Molly had an uncanny way of sensing David's emotions. On the rare days when memories of Emily weighed too heavily on his heart, Molly would quietly place her head on his lap, her soulful eyes meeting his. She never needed to do more than that. It was as though her silent presence was enough to remind David that he wasn't alone. One particularly cold evening, as the fire crackled in the hearth, David found himself staring at the wedding photo on the mantel. The familiar ache of loss crept into his chest, and he sighed heavily. "You would have loved her, Emily," he said aloud. his voice tinged with sorrow. Molly, lying at his feet, immediately lifted her head and pressed her warm muzzle against his hand. David smiled faintly, his fingers instinctively scratching behind her ears. "You always knew when I needed someone, didn't you?" Molly wagged her tail gently, her unwavering presence anchoring David to the moment. The puppies, with their boundless energy and unique personalities, became a source of constant amusement and joy. Each day brought new discoveries as they grew more confident and curious about their world. Finn, the brave explorer, was always the first to venture into new spaces, his nose leading him into countless adventures. Ruby, the gentle and affectionate one, often sought out David's lap for quiet moments of cuddling. Max, the troublemaker, delighted in chewing on anything he could find, from slippers to chair legs. Lila, ever observant, seemed to watch the chaos with quiet amusement before joining in at just the right moment. And Theo, the playful bundle of energy, had a knack for tumbling into David's arms during their daily play sessions. "They're little miracles, each of them," David mused one afternoon as he watched them chase each other around the backyard. Molly sat beside him, her watchful gaze following her pup's every move. "They've brought this place to life." The puppy's antics often left David laughing until his sides hurt, a sound that had been absent from his life for far too long. They reminded him of the simple joys of living, their exuberance rekindling his own zest for life. As the days turned into weeks, David realized that Molly and her puppies had done more than fill the void in his home. They had begun to heal the void in his heart. Each moment spent with them, whether it was a walk through the snowy fields or a quiet evening by the fire, chipped away at the loneliness he had carried since Emily's passing. One morning, as the first rays of sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, David sat with a cup of coffee, watching Molly groom her puppies. The sight brought a lump to his throat. "You've taught me so much, Molly," he said softly, "about love, about resilience, about moving forward." Molly glanced up at him, her eyes warm and understanding. It was a look that spoke volumes, as if she was saying, "You're not alone, and you never will be." David's newfound purpose extended beyond his home. The blog he had started continued to thrive, with readers eagerly awaiting updates on Molly and the puppies. Their stories resonated with people from all walks of life, inspiring messages of love, hope, and connection. One comment in particular stayed with David. "Your stories remind me that even in the darkest times, there's always a chance for new beginnings. Thank you for sharing your journey." The words gave David a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced in years. By opening his heart to Molly and her puppies, he had not only healed himself, but had also become a source of inspiration for others. It was a powerful realization, one that filled him with hope for the future. Emma and Noah continued to visit regularly, their presence further enriching David's life. Noah adored the puppies, spending hours playing with them and showering them with affection. Emma often remarked on the changes in her father, marveling at how alive he seemed. "You're like a different person, Dad," she said during one visit. "It's like you found yourself again." David smiled, his gaze resting on Molly. "I think I have," he replied. "Molly and her pups, they've brought something back that I thought I'd lost forever." One evening, as David sat by the fire with Molly at his side and the puppies snuggled together in their bed, he reflected on the journey they had shared. He thought about that stormy night when Molly had first appeared on his porch, a stray seeking shelter. At the time, he had seen himself as the one offering help, but now he understood that it was Molly who had saved him. "You've changed everything, Molly," he said softly, reaching down to stroke her fur. "You've given me back my life." Molly responded with a gentle wag of her tail, her head resting against his knee. David smiled, a sense of peace washing over him. For the first time in years, he felt whole. The love he had found in Molly and her puppies had not only healed his heart, but had also opened the door to a future filled with hope, connection, and joy. As spring fully blossomed, the warmth of the season mirrored the transformation within David Walker's home. What had once been a silent, lonely house was now alive with laughter, joy, and the boundless energy of 5 puppies growing into their personalities. Molly, ever watchful and calm, had not only been a mother to her pups, but also a source of strength and healing for David. As the days passed, he came to realize that their arrival was not just a coincidence, but a profound gift from God. David's routine had changed completely. Mornings began with the sound of tiny paws scrambling across the floor, eager for breakfast and playtime. Finn, Ruby, Max, Lila, and Theo had grown into vibrant, unique individuals, each adding their own spark to the household. Molly remained the heart of the family, her gentle nature grounding the exuberance of her pups and bringing David a peace he hadn't felt in years. One afternoon, as he watched the puppies chase each other around the backyard, David felt a deep sense of gratitude. The simple moments, the sound of their laughter, the sight of their tails wagging in unison, reminded him of the beauty in life's small blessings. "They're miracles, Molly," he said softly, his voice filled with emotion. Molly, lying at his feet, wagged her tail as if to agree. The blog David had started as a way to document Molly's journey had grown into something much larger. Molly's world, life with pause and purpose, had become a source of inspiration for thousands of readers around the globe. People from all walks of life shared their own stories of love, healing, and connection, creating a community that David never expected to find. Comments flooded in daily. "Your story gives me hope in humanity." "Molly's journey reminds me of my own rescue dog. Thank you for sharing this." "God works in mysterious ways, doesn't he? Molly found you, and through her you found yourself." The connections David formed through his blog became another avenue of healing. He no longer felt isolated. Instead, he was part of a larger tapestry of people who believed in kindness, compassion, and the transformative power of love. One evening, as the sun set behind the trees, bathing the backyard in a golden glow, David sat with Molly by his side. The puppies were playing nearby, their laughter and energy filling the air. He leaned back in his chair, watching the scene unfold, and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. "Emily would have loved this," he murmured. "She always said life was about finding the joy in unexpected places." He paused, his voice growing softer. "I think God sent you to me, Molly. You and your pups. You're more than a gift. You're a blessing." Molly turned her head to look at him, her eyes warm and understanding. She nudged his hand with her nose, as if to say she understood. David clasped his hands together and bowed his head. "Thank you, Lord," he whispered, his voice steady. "Thank you for bringing Molly into my life. Thank you for showing me that even in the darkest moments, your love can light the way." As the weeks turned into months, David found joy in every aspect of his new life. The puppies had grown into playful, loving companions, and Molly remained his steadfast anchor. Emma and Noah visited often, their bond with David growing stronger with each visit. The once silent house had become a haven of connection and love. The blog continued to thrive, spreading messages of kindness and compassion to an ever-growing audience. David often ended his posts with reflections on the ways God's grace had touched his life, encouraging readers to look for the unexpected blessings in their own journeys. One particular evening, as David sat by the fire with Molly and the puppies curled up around him, he reflected on how far he had come. The grief that had once weighed him down had been replaced by a sense of purpose and joy. His heart, once heavy with loss, was now filled with love. David's story is a testament to the power of love, faith, and the unexpected ways in which God works. From a lonely, grief-stricken man to a beloved member of a community, David's journey reminds us that even in the darkest times, there is hope. Let this story inspire us to open our hearts to the unexpected. Whether it's a stray dog seeking shelter or a person in need of kindness, God's love often comes in the most surprising forms. May we always have the courage to welcome it.
Let us pray.
Lord, we thank you for the blessings you bring into our lives, even when we least expect them. May your love guide us to be kind, compassionate, and open to the miracles around us. Bless everyone who reads this story, and may they find peace, hope, and joy in your grace. Amen. If this story touched your heart, please share it with others. Comment below with your thoughts or your own stories of love and healing. Let's spread hope, kindness, and faith in God's love together.